All right. Welcome everyone to Table Talk, where we talk all things tabletop. I'm your host, the Bella Gamer. And today we're going to be talking about something a little strange. This is going to be a very strange theme. As today, you can see here, I'm not with my co-host. I believe he's busy today. And also, we're going to be talking about things from a different perspective than I thought I would ever really have. And it's strange. It's strange to kind of be moving to a different side of the TTRPG fence. But, you know, I'm someone who's enjoyed tabletop for a very long time. I've played all kinds of games, and I've always been pretty firm on what kind of games I've enjoyed. I've always liked a healthy amount of game and crunch on my TTRPG systems. You know, I've always played games like Pathfinder or D&D. For a long time, I played many of the White Wolf games like Scion, and Anima Beyond Fantasy is definitely a game that has a lot of crunch, and you guys have heard me talk about that game quite a bit. But recently, if you watched last stream, you probably already know where this is going. I've been playing Legends in the Mist, and it's not a new system, though I really dislike when people are like, oh, this is just another Powered by the Apocalypse type system, just because it uses the 2d6 partial success or full success based on your result kind of thing. It's a very different game. They just have the same similar type of resolution mechanics, but like that's like saying any game that has a d20 is the same. It's not. Obviously, the way the games interact with their own mechanics and rules are different, but the thing that Legend in the Mist does, I think, very well is it makes you think about the context of what you're adding to your character sheet all the time. Every stat, essentially, every tag, every theme is relevant narratively speaking. And I've been playing it a lot. I've been playing it a lot solo mode, just using an oracle and playing that way, which is the first time I've ever really felt like doing something like that, which is really crazy to me. And it's really started to make me think about what actually is tabletop, in the sense of, if you're looking for a game that blends a good amount of narrative and of mechanics, you know, like for me, the ideal tabletop is one that blends tabletops and mechanics, where it's a game where my choices mean something, and the way I set up my character makes them unique and different and function differently than any other character, or at least any other character at the table. And in addition to that, it has narrative where my choices mean something for what my character is, what they're doing in the story, and what they have. You know, for a really long time, I've been kind of sitting in this idea that a good system is one that has a good enough amount of mechanics to make it where this hobby that's predominantly narratively focused, it feels balanced, right? Where we're talking story as much as we're playing a game. But as much as I've felt that way for a really long time, I never have experienced a game that felt like every new stat point essentially I put on my character sheet is something really important and very interesting for this, how the game plays, and for my character. You play Pathfinder 2nd Edition, a game that I absolutely love. every time you add a skill increase to your character, it's like, cool, I'm now better at oh god, I've been playing too many games, I don't remember all the different skills. I'm now better at athletics or acrobatics. You know, my recall knowledge when it comes to arcane or occult is a little bit better. And so it's like that 1 point adds technically a lot that you can do, in the sense that you can now do a whole range of things a little bit better, but it doesn't actually mean anything. What it means is just you have a higher chance of success when you make those kinds of checks. But that doesn't tell my character's story, right? If you're unfamiliar with Legend in the Mists, and let me pull up a clip real quick or a piece of art that shows just a really good example of like how Legend in the Mist works. I'll just grab something from the book real quick. But how Legend in the Mist works is you have a theme, and in this theme, the theme itself is a tag, and everything in that theme is a tag related to the major theme that you can stack together to make a check, essentially. And so if I can find real quick something that really shows. There we go. I'm just going to save this as a random thing in my downloads folder here. Okay, that'll work. All right. So right here, I'm showing on stream a example of kind of like how a skill check will come out. So the point of the action in question being shown is you're trying to get to know a NPC that you saved from a recent scene. And it asks, okay, what about power? What helps this check? Good listener and peddler. So good listener is a tag that that the peddler has or that you have, and peddler is, you know, the fact that you saved them. So these two add to your check. They add essentially a +2 to a 2d6. Now, what could hinder? You are a loner and she's an oddball. So the check completely counters itself out, meaning that you have a power of 0, which means you just roll a flat 2d6. But what happens? On success, you gain hopeful, and on failure, you gain headache 1, and on a 9 through 7 on this check, you would gain both. You feel a little good, but, you know, talking is hard. Now, why I like this system so much is everything is context-based. What you add to your character can mean a lot. I've been playing a very Lore of the Mystery style game, and one of my themes is my potion sequence, which is kind of like a broad range use ability typically in this kind of game or in this kind of story. And when you're about to do a check, you ask yourself, what is directly helpful? And your themes can have things like experiences, weapons, background, skills, everything that is generally associated with it. So if you're a mercenary, for instance, you might have a skills and trade mercenary, and then you could have a tag good with a blade, and then you could have a sense for danger, right? And then you might have a past of used to be an Imperial soldier, you know, or have been to war. And under that past, you could have been like, I've seen some things, and locks in when things get dangerous. And so when you're fighting someone, you're like, okay, I'm a mercenary by trade, someone who fights someone good. Then you can use good with a blade, along with a sword or other kind of item you might have on your character, and, you know, been to war, locks in when it gets dangerous, and that's a +5. But the enemy is typically going to have some tags that are going to play against it. If you're fighting a troll, for instance, it might be massive in size, you know, and so it might be a -1 or a -4 if it is a might level above your own, which is something I don't really need to talk about, but the game has a method of making, you know, a villager fighting a dragon is a very unfair fight for the villager, you know, kind of scenario. But, you know, the troll might have very large, it might have tough skin, it might have like a special status of regenerative, so that when you deal damage to it, it actually reduces wound type tags, except for tags with like the burn or acid kind of tags every round. And what starts happening is you have a character who isn't attacking because they have a good attack skill, or they're good at strength or whatever. You have a character who's attacking because of what they do for a living and their experiences and what they have on their person. And it makes every +1 to a check at the end of the day feel really good. And the fact that it's on this bell curve of a 2d6 really plays into the game's favor, because at the end of the day, right, you're not going to be perfect at what you're going to do. And the game doesn't roll against the players. It's only the players who are rolling. So when a player rolls the dice, if they get a partial success, it's pretty normal. Like, I'm someone who's done a lot of LARPing. I've done karate tournaments back in the day, not full contact, you know, kid level stuff. And a lot of the time, whenever whenever we would come to blows, or whenever it's like you're attacking, it's that split second of what does the opponent do. And typically you have a good chance of either hitting each other or barely making out scathe, but maybe you become like unbalanced. Like, there's a lot of ways that it comes out where you don't just get a clean hit and walk away like nothing happened. Typically something happens. And so the bell curve really benefits the system because it allows you to experience that most of the time. But if you get above a 10, which becomes easier with every +1 you add to a check, then you get more likely a chance to deal damage to an enemy. Now, I know I'm just explaining Legend in the Mist, like, again. And I'll probably make a video about Legend in the Mist, you know, in the near future. But what I really want to emphasize is what Legend in the Mist does is it adds context to stats. You don't have a strength attribute or a attack or simple weapons or martial weapons skill. What you have is what tags are relevant and pertinent to your character. Being a mercenary, good with swordsmanship, been to war, you know, all this kind of stuff is like, yeah, I've done it. Like, mercenary is my trade, good swordsmanship is my skill, and been to war is my experience, right? And the game is all about like logical context. So you can't just stack forever combat traits. And you don't want to do that because the game doesn't give you a lot of these tags to work with. When you start off, you have 4 themes, and each theme has 3 tags and 1 weakness. And you want the weaknesses because weakness allows you to progress these to get up to a maximum of 10 tags per theme, which at the end of the day could be 40 tags, which is an insane amount. And that's not even including story themes or story tags. Which are like, you know, you find a legendary item, it becomes essentially like a story theme that you get in your backpack that you can add to relevant checks. And 40 tags is a lot, and I feel like I need to play the game more to know if when you start getting to that point, if the game just starts to feel overwhelming, because then you have 40 things to track, and sometimes you just have some bleed between some of your themes and certain types of actions. But when you start off, it's 12 tags, which isn't a lot because it's mostly just like short 1 to 3 letter phrase, 1 to 3 word phrases that just mean, you know, like strong as an ox, you know, stubborn as a bull, all that kind of stuff. And when you're playing your character, and I feel like this is kind of the saving grace, when you play your character, you get used to, like, okay, I'm fighting, here's what I'm adding to the checks. And I love it. I think it's really interesting, especially because it's a context-based system. Even how you injure the enemies is context-based. Like, enemies will have thresholds, or limits, it's called in the game, where if you get like wounded 5 on an enemy, it'll take him out, or wounded 2 if it's like a goblin or something like that. And any damaging type conditions that you apply to an enemy using your checks, you know, using your weapons, will effectively stack together. So a wound 1 can become wound and burned. Usually I have someone to talk to that gives me a chance to think about my words. Wound and burned, or slashed and burned 2, you know, when you add it on top, as long as the wound condition is, you'll get like these status conditions that have a track from like 1 to 6, and if you do like wounded 2, you fill in the 2 spot, but that leaves the 1 slot open. So if you do 1 wound, it fills that 1 slot, and the wound doesn't essentially progress. But, and you know what, I can just I can just pull up another image to better describe what I'm talking about here. And it's like on the prior page I was just showing. Okay, so here they're talking about stuns. So you have stun 2, and then if you get stun 4, you would mark the 4 spot, but you see these open slots. And so if you next take stun 2, the stun 2 is filled, so you go to the next highest slot. So stun 3. And if you're trying to get stun 5, the next stun of 2 or higher will fill in that 5 slot. Hopefully that makes sense. But it more or less, it just makes it where combat isn't just like you do wounded 2 and then you do wounded 2 and then you're done. It's typically you have to hit an enemy with 3 or 4 good rolls without getting completely dunked on yourself. And things like stunned or things like wounded subtract from your rolls if you're stunned or wounded as well. So it becomes harder to do higher level hits the more injured you get in combat. It makes combat feel really tight and really difficult, like, especially because in this game context matters. If you become wounded, you have to like start thinking about what you're going to do next, because your ability to deal damage in the system effectively goes down the more wounded you get. So you have to start trying to apply more of your tags. You have to start burning your tags, which scratches them off for like an in-game day, more or less. So your swordsmanship is like you put everything into this at the risk of exhausting your swordsmanship, but adds +3 rather than +1, which could be the difference. And it has been the difference for a lot of the combats that I've done myself. And it makes combat more interesting, and it makes combat to some degree, I won't say more tactical because that's not necessarily true, but it makes combat more dynamic. Because if you do the same thing over and over and over, you're going to just lose. You're going to lose a fight because you are not trying to interact with the scene. You're not trying to apply conditions. You can't just like attack the enemy and nothing happens, or attack the enemy and just like burn them down. Like D&D has a really bad problem of you get next to an enemy and then you fight to the death, because if you move away, they get to attack you and everything like that. In this game, you don't have to worry about like moving away from an enemy, because the only time you worry about it in that sense is if you're trying to run away. And when you're trying to run away, then you apply whatever tags apply to that check, and the enemy can attack you as they're trying to chase you as a consequence, which is really interesting. It makes it where no matter what you do, it starts to function like a normal combat. Like, if you're fighting the enemy, it's, you know, do you kill them before they kill you? Maybe you burn some tags. Maybe you use your environment to apply some statuses to the enemy that make them weaker, or give yourself buffs like drinking a potion or something like that. Or if you're trying to run away because the fight's not going your way, well, now the enemy's chasing you and still trying to hit you, you know, and hopefully you're better at running away than you are at fighting, which makes a lot of sense. And it's made me just second guess my entire views on tabletop, because as far as I've been playing TTRPGs, I've been playing the standard kind of games for a large part of it. You're on a battle map and get to do your thing on your turn, and you can attack, you can use strategy to kite enemies or create difficult terrain or all kinds of stuff, and that's fun. That's really fun. But what happens, especially like in games like Pathfinder 2, that offers a lot more, it offers a lot more dynamic actions than D&D does, because not every enemy has attack of opportunity. But what happens is you go from a narrative style game to a board game, plain and simple. Like, yes, could you describe your actions, add a lot of passion to the scene? Yes. It's not required. And you do so many combats, and there's just going to be combats that are not important enough for you to really put that much effort in. And you're coming to play a TTRPG, so you're coming to have fun. And sometimes you just want to chill and not really worry about adding a lot of extra effort into a scene. Like, you're in a combat scene, you know what you're going to do, and you give a little description, and then you go from there. And then you have to wait for a good long while. Where in Legend in the Mists, there's not a lot of like resolution mechanics, as far as like, if you get hit, it's not okay, now the enemy rolls the dice and then you apply resistances, and then, you know, we have to be like, oh, we need a healer, you know, so you on your turn heal us, try to mitigate some of this damage. I mean, you can still kind of do that a little bit in the game, but it's more of, okay, I make my check on my turn, I do good, I'm done. If I do okay, it's like, okay, then I get this status applied, and I apply my status, and we're done. You know, it's really, really fast. And there's a lot of other like minor mechanics that can really make it interesting, where you can attack a second time in a row if you get so much above a power above your enemy's defenses, and so on and so forth. But it has a faster resolution, and the things you're doing in the combat are inherently narrative. And it's strange that to me, a more rules like game just feels more like what I'm looking for in a combat scenario or not combat scenario than like games like Pathfinder 2nd Edition. And now this is just a me thing. And this is not to say that people who just want that like board game tactical experience when it comes to their TTRPG combat is wrong. I'm just saying that it's interesting to me that I've been playing a game solo, which I've never done before, and I've been enjoying combat solo in a way I just never would before. Because it's like playing chess against yourself, right? If you're playing solo in Pathfinder 2nd Edition, you are just like, okay, how do I think the enemy would move to try to make this fair? And you just are playing against yourself. But at the end of the day, you know, if you try to play smart against yourself, you have to always have that level of like, okay, is this too meta? Is it not? And am I getting too routine with this? Because, you know, at the end of the day, I kind of know how I'm going to act or how the enemies are supposed to act or whatever. And Legend of the Mist just doesn't have that problem. Because no matter what I do, contextually speaking, the game will randomly generate what kind of enemy I'm fighting and what their statuses are. And I can decide in a scene, okay, the snake that I'm fighting isn't going to just bite me this round. It's going to constrict me, you know, or it's going to attempt to wrap around me to reduce my movement, which will make it more difficult for me to fight back. And talking about a snake, right? So I've been playing the Ravensdale solo mode, which I hated at the end of the day, but that's a different story. But I enjoyed a scene where you come to like this sunken outpost and there's like this dirty pool of water and you gotta like dive in. Well, I brought with me some NPCs from the village because that's how the story goes. And I took a rope, wrapped it around me, and I dove into the water so that if something went bad, they could help pull me out. And in the water, I came across a giant poisonous snake that wrapped around me and was biting me. It was going really, really bad, and it was constricting me. So movement was more difficult, and I didn't have a lot of tags based on movement or swimming anyway. But I had that rope tied around me and my allies who could pull me out of the water. So, despite me being entangled and everything like that, that rope and the villagers and an NPC managed to pull me out of the water so that then they could join the fight and they could be added as attacking tags essentially to beat the snake to death, and we did. But it was really scary, and it only works that way because I said I'm going to tie a rope around myself knowing that something might happen and dive into the water, and it makes sense. If you were to try to do this in Pathfinder, you could, to a degree. You could say, hey, all right, I tie a rope around my waist and then I go down, and when combat starts, it's like, okay, here you are on the grid. The snake is on you. You're currently immobilized. And it's like, okay, can they pull me out of the water? It's like, okay, they will have to make a strength check. And if they succeed, they can move you like 10 feet, out of the water. And it would just become so much more granular and so much more mechanical than it did in a simple tag-based game. Which is why I'm in this situation now, where I'm like, is tag-based TTRPGs like the future? Because I think there's something to it. Now, Legend of the Mist has its flaws, and it's not a perfect system, at least yet. But it's the closest I've felt to a game blending narrative and mechanics to a point where it's like, you can do whatever. You can make whatever kind of character you want. and they function however you want. And the best part is you can't really min-max, because sure, right, you can make it where all your tags help you in combat, making you a combat god, contextually speaking, as long as none of the tags are conflicting, and none of the tags are because also something that happens is you can mitigate negative sasses as consequences. If you're like attacking someone and you're being attacked back, you can get a reaction check essentially, and whatever tags you didn't use in that check you can now use potentially, if it makes sense, to defend yourself. So if you're wearing armor, for instance, you're not using that to attack, but if you get attacked, you use the armor tag to help mitigate the status condition that you're getting. And so, like, I think a real mid-maxed combat character is one that has like half of its tags are based on hurting an enemy. Maybe they have a few tags on like a weapon tag for range and melee situations, and everything else can apply to both somehow. And then the other set of their tags are defensive tags that can protect them from a wide range of situations, like avoiding area attacks or heavy armor or warded magic or anything like that. Which is all well and good until you have to do like anything else. You have to do any narrative-based stuff, your character is going to absolutely suck at it. If you are doing any traversal type things, like balancing across a log over a ravine, you're going to have no tags for that. And it's really hard to have a tag that can do everything, because the system specifically says if a tag is too vague, that it doesn't directly but indirectly applies. So for instance, if you have the tag wizard, right? Well, wizard can cast magic and can cast spells. But that alone doesn't just let you cast any spell and do anything. If it's indirectly useful, so being a wizard theoretically could help you in this situation if you know the right spell, then you have to do a preparatory action to do it. And then typically that action is like, okay, so you're going to prepare a spell. You're going to roll your wizard and all your wizard related tags. And then that is going to give you a beneficial tag or status condition. Like say you want to cross the beam, so you get like Cat's Grace, right? So you would get Cat's Grace 3 potentially. And how it works in the game is the power of your check minus any negatives will determine what your benefit is. So if you get +3 power on your check and you succeed, you would add a +3 tag, or Cat's Grace 3. So whenever you would roll something for balance or whatever, you would add a +3 to your power and any other relevant tags. So you could convert essentially your good tags into whatever condition you need to, which sounds really, really strong. In combat, that's hard because you're spending an additional action to even do a thing, which will make it where you're essentially taking twice the consequences for what you would do if you just had the ability to like do damage to an enemy. And in a narrative sense, if you're preparing a spell to give yourself Cat's Grace and you get like a partial success, which is the most likely, you're going to get that +3, converting those tags into what you need for that scenario. But that consequence could be a negative thing that overall affects your progress on the journey, or gives you something like drained, right? Like you've used your magic and now you become a bit drained, making your next spell more difficult to use, or reducing the effectiveness of your physical actions, which in this case would be really bad for trying to balance, right? So you'd actually reduce the benefit of your tags. So Omni tags are just not really good, or they're really good when they're paired with a bunch of other tags that can work with them. But I've yet to find a way to really min-max the tags, and maybe there is a way, and that can just be addressed by the game, and it has to some degree. But so it's hard to min-max. Every stat is important to your character's narrative, and relevant to what your character can and can't do. Combat inherently becomes more narrative. And your choices matter. There you go. Your choices matter because what you have for a tag matters. A greatsword and a dagger, yes, in theory, if you have all the same types of tags, can do the same type of damage. But a dagger can be used in some situations that a greatsword can't, and the same vice versa. You know, a greatsword might be much better at getting through an enemy's defenses, a GM might decide. Where a dagger might be good for a wide range of utility uses, like whittling or picking lock even. And so even if they do the same type of damage and the same amount of damage, relatively speaking, what they do can differ in a lot of different scenarios. And one doesn't necessarily become better than the other. And if you want good loot in the game, then you have story themes where you get a great sword of fine craftsmanship. So you get like a weapon that has its own subtags. So you get like great sword, fine craftsmanship, and blazing runes, right? So now it can potentially do fire damage, and it's really good at cutting people, and you know, and the like. That makes it a better weapon than a weapon that doesn't have all these tags. And you can craft such a weapon if you have a bunch of crafting tags, but obviously if you have a bunch of crafting tags, then you're going to have less combat orientated tags. Even though you can kind of convert those crafting tags somewhat, when you're making a beneficial tag that's somewhat more permanent, then it's a 2-for-1 cost. So 2 power for every 1 tag. So you would need effectively twice as many crafting to get the same level as if you just had like normal tags for combat. Which is still useful, especially if you have a group of players, because then that benefit can be applied to multiple people. But what I'm saying is, like, I'm going to really struggle, I think, moving back to other systems, because this game does exactly what I want it to do. The only bad thing about Legend in the Mists is it puts more effort on the person who's writing tags, the player, than other games do, because other games are like making choices and you don't have to think a lot, you just have to decide what is best for you. Where in Legend in the Mist, you have to be like, okay, let's be creative, let's add some tags that are going to be useful, and let's make a character who's going to work. Because in Legend in the Mist, you can definitely make a character who is not well-rounded, and it really sucks. I've been suffering with that somewhat myself. I've been fixing it over time because I could improve my tags. But yeah, it's something that it fixes a lot of problems, and you can do anything. It's a tag-based system. It's just all based on your rudimentary logic for your setting, you know. And I was hoping my co-host would be here today, and I think he told me he wasn't going to be here today, but I'm a dad, and so it's just hard for me to remember things. But I really need someone to convince me why Legend in the Mist, or this tag-based system I've explained over the last 45 minutes, is any worse than a tactical-based game like Pathfinder or Lancer, you know. So leave that in the comments. I'll do my best to respond. But if your comment is just, I like this better, then there's nothing I can really say about that one way or the other. If it's, you like how this functions better, then that's not a good argument. But if it can do something that you just can't do with a tag-based system, like, and again, right, I love Lancer. I love piecing a mech together. and I love how the different weapons work, and I love the weapon tags, and the practical and tactical nature of Lancer, I feel like would struggle in something like Legend in the Mists, because that is very much a tactical based game. But that's for playing a tactical based game, right? Like, Lancers are really good if you want to play a very tactical based game, because it's a very tactics based game. But I'm talking about just a normal TTRPG experience where we're going through a story, telling a narrative, and doing all this other kind of stuff. Like, Lancer, as fun as a game as it is, it has very little in the way. Like, you could say it has a tag-based system with how its out-of-mech stuff works, and I would say no. You're putting skill points into undefined skills that you can define yourself, but they don't stack. They don't add different parts of your characters, and those points don't necessarily mean anything. Solving problems with fists is, yeah, it's like, okay, when it comes to fighting people, I'm going to use this skill, but you're using that skill. You're not combining your other skills and experiences. You just have a skill that says I beat people up, essentially, which is essentially the same in, like, if you were to play Pathfinder and just say, hey, can I convince this guy by beating him up? I'm just going to use my combat stat without actually dealing damage, you know, which doesn't really mean a lot. Where in Legend of the Mist, you can be like, okay, I'm a thug, and I'm intimidating, and I got fists that make people cry, you know. That sounds more interesting. That sounds inherently more narrative and more just dynamic and interesting than than I have a really good beat people up skill, you know. So, and it's all about what tabletop experience you want. At the end of the day, Lancer's really good for people who want a good mech experience, and what the benefit of Lancer is for that is it's already designed to do it. The stats and the abilities in this game are designed to do it. You just have to go in, pick your favorite mech license, and go from there. Where in Legend of the Mist, if you want to do something similar, you have to be like, okay, what is my mech? What can it do? And you have to invent tags that match what you can do. And that takes a lot more effort. Now, if they had a source book for it, then cool, sure. But at the end of the day, it's going to be a very different experience. And you might not want a narrative experience. You might want that more tactical experience. You might want that more Armored Core feel, which, to be fair, I'm a big Armored Core fan myself. And I can definitely see myself preferring that experience in the sense of I want that tactical game experience versus a more narrative-based experience. But when I'm looking at TTRPGs and what I want to do for a TTRPG, I'm really thinking about how I can tell an interesting story with my characters. And that just kind of leans more into Legend of the Mist for me. And sure, combat may be more simplified in a sense, but to me it's more contextual. So it's narratively and mechanically more dynamic than just a grid-based combat system, even if it's less tactical in a sense. Because the challenge comes from how good of a storyteller am I actually determines how good I can use my tags and how I can benefit in the situation. Versus how good I am at this game determines how good I am at the combat, rather than my storytelling abilities, which is something that I am particularly good at. And that's the thing, right? I know other people aren't necessarily as good at it and haven't been doing it nearly as long. And there's a lot of people who just want to have a beer and pretzels game where they're just going to a combat game, which is fine. That's completely okay. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm just saying I want to be convinced that Legend of the Mist is somehow worse than other TTRPGs in a TTRPG sense. Because I want to know what I'm missing out, or what, like, where am I having a problem because as it stands currently, for most of the games I'm playing and have been playing, I could just use Legend in the Mist and honestly get a generally better experience for me, you know? And hopefully I can... We are playing this. We've played one session of it, but a lot of it was character creation and just like a little test run, so I didn't stream it. But we will be streaming it hopefully next week and some weeks after that, because some people are going to be gone, and so we're taking a break from anime for the time being. But we'll see. We'll see what my other players are, how they feel about the system, and maybe their perspective can change my opinions, and maybe I'll notice some flaws running it for other people. But playing it by myself has been really fun, and I feel like if it's TTRPG I can play by myself, that's a really good sign. And in addition to that as well, like, I just feel like the more TTRPGs that have this idea of blending narrative and mechanics, where every stat point is something that is relevant to your character's narrative and it isn't just there just to be there, I think is a good thing and is a proper evolution. Like in Legend in the Mist, nothing I add to my character sheet is bad as long as what I'm adding to the character sheet is relevant to my character and to what's going on, right? You could definitely add a tag that is useless for some reason, like loves cats. It's not useless all the time, but it's useless a good portion of the time. If you have no intent on dealing with cats at all, loves cats doesn't really do it. It could be there for fun. It could be something where you could talk to an NPC and maybe have this like joined interest in loving cats. But most of the time, you're not going to be dealing with someone who loves cats. So it's not a very useful tag, but you could do it if you really wanted to. And maybe that's one of the problems, right? The system has a lot of room for error. But you can make bad characters in almost any TTRPG if you really want to. And you can just play the game enough to get past that point. So I don't know. I really don't know. It's interesting. And I never thought I was going to be on this side because I've always been a big fan of game mechanics. I love like how anime has different mechanics for how the key system works, how the magic system works, how summoning works, how psychic powers work. You know, they all function very differently, and I love that. And I love how in anime you can make a character who is good at a thing and always makes their checks, versus games like Pathfinder where when you're good at something you only fail a little bit less. Right? Like every skill increase only gives you a plus 5% more success rate, and you don't start with a very high success rate. It's like 60%. And granted, if you're using skill checks as you're supposed to, you can get past that, but anyone could get past that if they're even a little bit trained and high enough level, which doesn't feel good. So like in anime, it doesn't matter how high your level is. If you don't put any points in anything, you just suck at it. And if you put points into it, hopefully you put enough to actually be good at it. But even then, right, Legend in the Mist, you can invent game mechanics for how your things work. Like the book goes in and tells you with some of the magics. Say you need to do spell preparation, so you do spell preparation, and then you have the mana status, and then when you use your spells, you can use the mana status to power that spell, but when you do so, you reduce the mana status by what that spell is. So for instance, the wizard who needs to prepare a spell could get mana 3 or mana 4, and then they're like, okay, so now I'm going to use wizard, and I'm going to use my magic staff, and I'm going to use one of my mana to do a fireball. And so now in combat, you can just do fireball 3 times in a row for 3 mana, essentially. Or you could do a bigger fireball by adding an extra mana, but it reduces your mana faster. And then you'll need to charge your mana up again. And you can, there's a lot of ways that it can mechanically like change and add things, which I find super interesting. So I just think it's interesting, and I think we need to start looking at tag-based TTRPGs and see what Legend in the Mist is doing, because even if you just blend what it is doing with your favorite kind of TTRPG, I think it adds more than it subtracts, and it creates this interesting dynamic of you could have tactical based rules and mechanics, but you could layer on tags on top of it so that your actions become something that are meaningful, that have narrative weight, and that have relevance to who your character is, you know, rather than picking up feats, picking up tags that allow you to do other types of things. I think is an interesting idea. And I just think it's something that, like, games have been dabbling with tags for a long time. Technically, Pathfinder has tags. Your weapon tags determine how the weapon functions. If it has the reach tag, it can reach, obviously. It can reach a space further away. If it has the finesse tag, you can use your dex to hit rather than strength. If you have agile, when you do multiple attacks, it reduces the multiple attack penalty by the number of attacks you've made -1. So if you made 1 attack, it doesn't subtract anything, but if you made 2 attacks, then it subtracts 1 from the multi-attack penalty, and so on and so forth. So it has tags, and most games have tags to some degree, but I feel like these tags need more weight, and we need to start applying tags to more things. Like, honestly, if you took Pathfinder and you changed skill increases to adding tags to your character, I think that would work just better. I think that would just make it more interesting. And you could still have proficiency to some degree. I mean, technically there's might in Legend in the Mist, which could make those tags essentially get the same benefit. But the tags, I think, would just be more interesting than skills. Like, if tags just replace skills all together, I think it would work actually better, which is interesting to me personally. I think it's something that creates this interesting sense of, yes, technically a tag could be less diverse than like Arcana as a skill, right? Like, know is magic, or knows the arcane is somewhat different than just having an Arcana skill. Not by much, but like in some ways. But I feel like it would make it more interesting. It would make giving skill increases more dynamic and more relative to your character, and just makes your characters more unique, because the way your tags are written and what they mean just would mean more. I don't know, like, I don't want every stream to just be me talking about Legend in the Mists. It's just really hard not to when I'm running into this problem over and over and over again of like, okay, I just don't feel like playing other games right now, because the tag system does pretty much everything that I've ever wanted, you know? Like, it needs to be polished up a little bit, but only a little bit. And it just makes my characters feel more complete, more like I know what my character is about and what their personality is and what their everything is, because the game is reinforcing that. Like, being determined can be a tag, and that can speak a lot about who your character is and what they do. So I don't know. It's something that I really want to have some really good discourse on. So I'm calling out to all you now. Let me know your thoughts. You know, are tags, what's not good about tags? You know, we don't have to pretend that everything is equal, right? You guys can come at me, as long as what you're saying isn't just I like this better or I think this works better, then we're good. You, like, just tell me why it's better. Tell me how it's better. Don't tell me, you know, you think it's better because it feels better, which is a valid thing to some degree, right? But then it becomes personal. It becomes your own preferences, and it's very hard to argue a preference into someone else. But all right, it's I'm gonna be ending stream a little bit early today because I'm alone and it's hard for me to talk twice as much without having someone else to like give me a breather. So essentially I've done the talking I normally would do for a stream already about halfway through. Makes sense. It's a busy time. April's also going to be really busy for the channel, and so there might be some tabletops that are missing. I promise future tabletops are not going to all be about Legend in the Mist. I might talk about it at least one more time, but I'm not going to be, you know, it's not going to be the main theme of the channel moving forward. I'll be making a video, hopefully, about Legend in the Mist. It's just hard. I'm a dad. You can tell by my hair that I'm a dad, and that last night was rough. And I do want to make content. Like, it's kind of hard at this period in time because a lot of the normalcy that's going to be coming into my life is going to be this summer. So we gotta wait until this summer before, like, my mom is moving up to the area where I'm living, which will help because that'll allow me to have some time to make some videos during the week. We'll get on like a schedule. But that won't be, she won't be here until like May or June, give or take. Maybe even a little bit later than that. And April, we're going to be missing a few streams because we have members of the channel who are currently gone. That makes it really hard for us to play our games. So my table talks might also just be called off because it's just real hard for me to talk for 2 people's worth during this time. And you know, we don't have a chat that is currently active enough, and that's on me, right? That's on me because the channel's just been dead because I haven't been making videos. So I'm not blaming anyone for not being here, but since there's less for me to bounce off of, it's like I'm pretty much making a live video at this point, but much less edited and less thought through. But, you know, I want to be here to give you guys a chance to interact and to have interesting conversations because we have with the chat at some point. So things will be getting easier after April. Once April is done, I feel like everything is going to start going back to a normal level. And then hopefully this summer, my life is going to get a lot more regular and I'll be able to make videos. And I'll be looking at some of the games. I'll be looking at Daggerheart. I'll be making some more videos on anima. And probably make some more Lancer videos. I know there's a lot of hungry Lancer people out there for Lancer content. So I definitely want to do some more of that. I just want to make content again. I really miss making content. But when I have so few hours in the day to do anything to myself, the last thing I want to do is just some more work. And like recording is fine, but editing is kind of a pain. I've never been really big on editing. I'm a talker person. I'm not the worker person. So, you know, it's just life. And I've prioritized my own health because at the end of the day, my own mental health means a lot more to my daughter than how good my YouTube channel is doing. So it is what it is. But I'm not giving up on the channel. I'm still working on it. If someone's watched this VOD up to this point, good on you. I appreciate you. Type banana in the comments, I guess. And yeah, but that's gonna be it for me. Thank you all so much for watching. And I guess I'll do my normal sign out since I'm alone. So good luck with your games and leave the bad luck to me. And I'll see y'all next time. Bye.